Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the Brett Bradley Show. We have Jason Plummer, Paul Bradshaw for our debate. Okay, time for our opening statements. Jason, you may go first.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on this show, Brett. I really appreciate the opportunity to get in front of the voters and talk about the issues that matter. I'd like to thank Paula for being here as well. I think it's great. Southern Illinois is facing serious problems. We have double-digit unemployment rates. We've got a real trouble in the industries that really make up the economy of Southern Illinois. Our voices, when I do town halls and meet and greets across this congressional district in every county, people tell me their voice isn't being heard. They feel the issues that they're passionate about aren't being represented. That's why I'm in this race. I'm in this race because I'm a businessman. I'm an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserves, and I think I understand the policies and the path to prosperity in Southern Illinois. What we need right now is we need to roll back the federal government. This administration and their liberal allies in Congress and in the Senate is destroying Southern Illinois. Our energy industry, our ag industry, our manufacturing base are being decimated. We need pro-growth, pro-jobs economic policies. I'm in this race to talk about those issues, but more importantly than that, I'm in this race to make sure that we're represented in Washington by someone that shares the values and shares the beliefs of the people of Southern Illinois. We're a district that has really strong feelings on really specific issues. And what I see with this federal government right now and their assault on the Second Amendment, they're pushing Obamacare upon the voters of Southern Illinois is something we need to stop, we need to reverse, and I think I'm the candidate in the race to do that.
Paula, your opening statement, please.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. In 1859, oil was discovered in the United States, and it fueled a massive industrialization of our country. The United States used increasing amounts of oil until 1972, when we hit peak oil. By then, the downside of mindless consumerism had been noted, with human relationships commodified, once closely knit families and communities torn apart, the natural world polluted, and the values of our ancestors turned inside out. Thrift, honesty, and patience were no longer virtues in our new society, which could only profit with envy, gluttony, pride, and gambling. Nothing was sacred. Respect for the natural world was ridiculed as interfering with profits. When we hit peak oil, we briefly came to our senses. The speed limit was lowered, cars were fuel efficient, solar power was encouraged, and the EPA and the Endangered Species Act were passed. Mature, responsible people realized that the oil boom was over and we should start to live within our energy means. Unfortunately, the mature people were kicked out and the party resumed, with other people's oil bought on credit. Now we are again at a turning point. The entire world is running out of oil, and we realize that the burning of fossil fuels leads to climate change, or some of us realize, which interferes with food production. Few Americans now even realize that food grows outside where it isn't air conditioned, and if global warming continues, we won't be able to grow our food. Our ancestors would be amazed. When they gave thanks for the bounty of the earth, they had usually grown and harvested it themselves. The Green Party advocates a return to basics with local food and renewable energy production, grassroots democracy, and a human-centered society. It will take a lot of work to build a better society, but we have a lot of Americans who need work. We can do it. Thank you.
Jason, the first question is to you. Since September 11th happened 11 years ago, with Libya happened, do you think our country is safer pre-9/11 or post-9/11?
Well, I think that we're in an ever-evolving foreign policy stance right now. So during 9/11 or before 9/11, we had a lot of problems that we were facing. I think a lot of those things really weren't on the radar. Right now, a lot of the problems we're facing with some religious fundamentalism overseas is something we look at now, but I think we also miss the ball on things that are taking place in Russia and China. So I don't think it's really fair to ever say, when are we more safe or when are things more dangerous? I think what we need to make sure is we always have a very strong posture. I think in order to ensure that we have a strong posture out there, we need to make sure that our men and women in uniform have all the resources they need to defend ourselves. And I think the American people need to be represented by an administration that is very straightforward in terms of what its foreign policy is. Our enemies overseas and our allies overseas need to know that America is strong, and they need to understand where America stands on these major issues. And right now, there's a lot of countries that are very friendly to the U.S. that, quite frankly, are worried about the direction we're going. And there's countries overseas that aren't that friendly to us, and I think they smell weakness, and I think they're trying to take advantage of that. So I think the world is always a dangerous place, and I think we need to make sure that we have a robust foreign policy and a strong military to make sure that we defend our interests overseas and our men and women here back at home.
Paula, what about you? What's your view of this?
Well, I don't know. You can define safety in many different ways. Yeah, it may not be safe to be an American ambassador in a Middle East country right now, but if you're talking about Americans here at home safety, there's different ways of looking at safety. I personally feel absolutely no fear of Muslims. I'm more afraid of being unemployed. I'm more afraid of losing my house. I'm more afraid of getting in a car crash. I mean, all these things are much more likely to happen to an American than some goat herder in Yemen coming over here and harming us in any way. So I think it's very wrong for the United States to be blowing up goat herders in Yemen and brides on their wedding day in Afghanistan in some kind of preemptive, oh my God, this bride might come over to us and kill us someday, so we're going to kill her wedding party, her mother, her father, and all her cousins first, so that we can feel safe. I don't know. I think that kind of living in abject fear of others is not a very healthy way to live.
Even if they're trying to kill us?
That's what I just said. I feel absolutely no threat from goat herders in Yemen, from farmers in Afghanistan, from tribal people in Pakistan who are just trying to live their life. Some of them haven't even heard of the United States, like many people here haven't heard of Kakistan. But we're over in Kakistan, killing people. So, I just think that we should mind our own business, protect our own borders, and leave other people alone.
Okay, so this question might be a bad one, but after Libya, okay, they killed the ambassador, Marines are dead. If you're elected to Congress, would you support military action in Libya?
I wouldn't have supported military action on Libya last year, which is why we're in the mess we're in this year. Because the United States last year bombed the heck out of Libya. 50,000 bombs dropped on them, destroyed their civil, secular society, and the United States admits that it was allied with Al-Qaeda in Libya, just like it's allied with Al-Qaeda in Syria right now. Here are these people that we have been told for 11 years are our major enemies, and the United States is teaming up with them to destroy the only secular countries in the Middle East and turning them into Muslim fundamentalist countries and telling us that we're going to be safer because of that. This is absurd. I mean, this is clearly absurd what they're telling us, and I can't believe anyone would believe it, actually.
Okay, Jason, to you, would you support military involvement in Libya after what happened earlier this week?
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to have folks in Washington that are going to lay forward a really common sense foreign policy. And I agree to a certain degree with what Paula said in the sense that right now it's very confusing when you look at what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Libya, what's happening in Egypt, what's happening in other places that really aren't on the news right now, like in Jordan and elsewhere. It's a very confusing foreign policy. And I really wish our other opponent was here to really hear his thoughts on this as well, because, this is a typical question that's been asked of him in the past, and he refuses to answer. But look, we have an administration right now that in the last 18 months or so, we've been in a situation where a friend of the United States, Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, who's done a lot of good things for America. I don't know if he's the guy you want living next door to you, but he's definitely a guy that's kept peace and kept calm in a very tough neighborhood of the world, who had some issues, and we essentially threw him under the bus, and now we see Egypt going a direction that I think makes a lot of Americans uncomfortable. And then you switch gears and you take a place like Syria, where the Assad ruling clan has never been a friend of the United States. They've got the blood of Americans on their hands. Now they have the blood of a lot of Syrians on their hands. And essentially, the Americans are kind of sitting by and nothing's happening. So I think that we need folks in Washington that understand how these foreign policy decisions don't just impact us for this next 6 or 12 months, but how they impact us out 10 and 20 and 30 years. And we really need to get that under control. And I think, I'd go to Washington as an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserves to understand how these fundamental foreign policy issues impact this nation as a whole.
All right, Jason, this is going to be an important question for both of you, okay? The future of Afghanistan war will be an issue, okay? Would you support bringing the troops home in 2014 or the continuation of the war? Now, Jason, I'm sorry. Jason, that's your question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I think right now, that's something that's kind of controlled at the administrative level, and I think that the president has laid out plans to bring a bulk of the soldiers home. I think that it's something that we need to make sure that no matter what we do, the transition has to take place in a very common sense method in a way that politics isn't dictating foreign policy. I think our commanders on the ground need to be making the decisions because obviously they're the experts, they're the professionals, they understand what's going on the ground. What we can't have is a situation where we bring all of our folks home and immediately Afghanistan turns back into the situation that it was. We need to make sure that we stabilize that country and we allow that government to do everything they possibly can to ensure a long-lasting democracy where all of the various tribes, all of the various folks throughout that country, their rights are respected. I think that we see our soldiers coming home. I think that's going to continue to happen. I welcome them home. Our men and women in uniform have been doing great things in Afghanistan for longer than a decade now. But we need to make sure that all of those sacrifices haven't been made for nothing. And I think that we need, as I said, a foreign policy throughout the Middle East, not just Afghanistan, but in Iraq and Iran and these other countries that really, really ensures long-term stability to that region.
Paula, what about you? You send the troops home, or do you keep fighting?
Oh, absolutely. I'd bring them home. I feel sorry for these kids on their 4th and 5th deployment. I mean, that's absolutely, it's hard on families. People are getting divorced. Kids don't know their own dad or mom. I mean, it's absolutely horrible. But I disagree with Jason in that it's the United States' role to put a strong central government in Afghanistan. I don't think it's any of our business to tell other people the kind of government that they should have. And remember that Afghanistan was a very peaceful, stable society. Sure, they didn't have a strong central government, but they had, the tribal society was very, very, it was decentralized. Usually Republicans like decentralized governments. The different tribes ran their own affairs in their own way. And then in 1979 under Carter and really escalating under Reagan, the United States started destabilizing Afghanistan by funding the very mujahideen that we now say we don't like, sending them arms, sending them millions and millions of dollars, along with our allies, Saudi Arabia, who also are fundamentalist Muslims. And we basically destabilized that country back in the 80s. And so when the Taliban came in, the United States oil company, Unocal, wanted to put a pipeline through Afghanistan. But if you'll go back and read their paper, they said the problem is that this government is too decentralized. We need a strong central government that can put a lid on these tribal people that control their own territory. And that's what that's what the whole invasion of Afghanistan was about, trying to set up a strong central government, which 11 years later, we still haven't managed to do. Because it's very hard to turn people from a decentralized government to a central government if they don't really support it.
Well, I think that's kind of a moderated version of history. I mean, I think what destabilized Afghanistan was the Soviet tanks that rolled into the border that caused a massive civil war in Afghanistan. And the Unocal situation was long in the past by the time the 9/11 events took place, which is why we went there. We went there because Muslim fundamentalists were utilizing that country and neighboring countries to plan attacks on Western targets, and we are a major Western target. We need to make sure that we don't really allow those folks an area to do that. In terms of what kind of government the folks of Afghanistan have going forward, that's their choice, that's their option. I'm not here to force our will upon anybody. They're going the direction of democracy right now. I hope that democracy flourishes. But I can tell you right now, at the end of the day, our men and women overseas need to be focused on one thing and one thing only. That's keeping this nation safe and keeping the people of this nation safe. And we do that by ensuring that folks that want to attack us don't have areas where they can plan and launch attacks from.
Your name was hinted. You may respond. Yes.
The Soviets intervened after the United States did, as Brzezinski has pointed out, that the United States started supplying weapons to the Mujahideen before the Soviets intervened. The government of Afghanistan asked the Soviets to come in and help them because they were being attacked with American-supplied weapons. That's one thing. The second thing is that you talk about Afghanistan supplying a safe haven for the people who planned the attacks. Well, the people we are told planned the attacks, the 19 hijackers, actually planned them in Florida. So, yes, that's where they live. They didn't live in Afghanistan. None of them had ever spent any amount of time in Afghanistan except for briefly. They planned it in Florida and Germany. These people, these Saudis, did not live in Afghanistan.
Okay, quick question. Zacchaeus Moussaoui, what about him? No, he wasn't in the 19 hijackers. He was caught in Minnesota in 2001. What about like this Pakistan and Afghanistan? Like you say they're not from there.
I mean, the fact of the matter is the leadership of these groups were based in Afghanistan. That's where they were headed. If you look at the folks that ran it, I mean, I'm not going to get into a debate. There's much more pressing issues facing us right now. But the fact of the matter is, these people did spend time in Afghanistan. Their training camps were in Afghanistan. They had training camps in Libya. They have training camps in Pakistan. They have training camps in a lot of areas. But the fact of the matter is, those attacks were launched from the soil of Afghanistan. That's where their leadership was.
Paula, you may respond.
All I want to say is that's not the official story. You might want to look into it.
Okay, all right. So we're getting pumped up. That's good. All right. All right. Former presidents, this is for you, Paul. Former presidents have done military action smaller than war. Ronald Reagan bombed Libya in 1986. George H.W. Bush went after Noriega in Panama in 1989. Somalia, Bill Clinton, 1993. Haiti, 1994. Baltics in 1999. And Libya, which you mentioned, 2011. If you're elected to Congress, would you support military action? You've already hinted you wouldn't, but to take out a ruthless dictator, would you?
Okay, these ruthless dictators you're talking about have been there for years and years. I mean, Gaddafi is there for 30 years, and all of a sudden he's a ruthless dictator that can no longer stand. Yeah, I don't believe that. I think the problem was more that he threatened to sell his oil in gold dinars instead of dollars. The same as Saddam Hussein, who was a ruthless dictator that we supported all through the 80s. And all of a sudden it became intolerable for the people of Iraq to take this ruthless dictator that they'd had for 30 years with U.S. support anymore when Saddam Hussein threatened to sell oil in euros. So, I question our leaders. I definitely would not support it. And I also would hold to the Constitution, which says that only Congress can declare war. This idea of turning presidents into some kind of, I don't know, potentates, monarchies with their own private army that they can use to launch attacks all over the world without congressional approval. I think it's outrageous. It's unconstitutional and it must stop. And when I get to Congress, I will never, allow, I'd be one person, but I would be one of the people saying, no, you do not launch attacks without a declaration of war, which only Congress can do.
Jason, you're up.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, I'm the only person in this race that currently serves in the military, and so I have a great understanding and a great respect for the sacrifices our men and women make. I think that our leaders in Washington, I don't care if they're in the legislative branch or the executive branch, need to understand when they're making these decisions, they're sending men and women from around the country into a very dangerous situation, and they need to make sure that if we're going to make a tough decision like that, that the end result is worth the fight. And I think that Paula is correct in the sense that, Congress is the body that declares war, and I think we need to make sure that we hold our presence in check. One thing that really concerns me about the current administration is the massive amount of executive orders and the massive amount of actions they've taken, regulatory-wise, tax-wise, foreign policy-wise, domestically, everywhere, that goes around the legislative branch. It kind of goes around the way that our system of government is currently set to function. And I think we need to bring those constitutional fundamental beliefs back to our system of government. So in terms of those decisions, look, the folks in Washington right now, the president, the Pentagon, the CIA, they have far more information about threats and what's happening out there than most folks that are running for office right now. So I think we need to respect their decision, but we're in a position of power to check that decision. We need to make sure we do that. We need to make sure when we make these decisions, we do it for the right reasons, and we're not wasting our men and women in uniform. We're not wasting their time and their resources in places we shouldn't be.
Okay, last foreign policy question. We move a little bit more to the domestic side. Jason, this is for you. Do you support the Patriot Act? And if so, what other changes would you make to the Patriot Act?
Well, I think that the Patriot Act is something that Republican and Democrat administrations have supported and have kept in place. I think there are some changes that need to be brought into the Patriot Act. We're in a very interesting world in the sense that, as we were discussing earlier, people can plan and attack us from Afghanistan. They can plan and attack us from all kinds of different places. So we have to respect the constitutional rights of Americans everywhere. I'm a strong believer in the Constitution. I'm a strong believer in those rights. I think that the Patriot Act goes a little overboard in some regards, but I think it also has updated our national security and brought a lot of technological capabilities to us in terms of keeping out a lot of these foreign threats. I don't like the thoughts of using the Patriot Act domestically upon U.S. citizens. That's something that has to be reined in. That's something that I would aggressively go after. But in terms of foreign opportunities, the Patriot Act has done some good things. So the Patriot Act is a very complex thing. It's hard to talk about in 60 seconds, but it's something that needs to be addressed. Both parties support it right now. We need to make sure that we correct the problems with the Patriot Act without gutting the entire program.
Okay, well, we have 90 seconds, but I get what you're saying. Paula, you for the Patriot Act?
Yes, it's true that the Democrats and Republicans both support the Patriot Act, but the Green Party is absolutely and completely opposed to the Patriot Act. We have this little slogan, "Land of the free and home of the brave." Other countries have had terrorist attacks upon their soil, and they didn't respond by locking down the entire country as if we're now all in prison and being treated, every single one of us, as potential terrorists. The government spying on us is wrong. The government invading our houses without a warrant is wrong. If I have to sit here and read the Bill of Rights, I will. But this is the Patriot Act, Homeland Security, the Military Commissions Act, the NDAA, all of them are outrageous attacks upon Americans and upon our rights. And we, just being afraid of some goat herders in Yemen, to shake in our boots, give up all of our precious rights that we've had for so many years. The Green Party is absolutely adamantly opposed to the Patriot Act. And I would vote to overthrow it immediately.
Okay. All right.
As well as the NDAA.
Okay. We're going to go to some government overview and political questions. Paul, this is for you. Why should Southern Illinois vote for you for Congress? What qualifications do you have over your opponents?
Well, I'm a member of the Green Party, and the Green Party is a party of values and principles. We have 4 pillars and 10 key values. Anyone can look them up and see what I would be guided on for voting in Congress. I think that the federal government, I'm opposed to the oppressive arm of the federal government and the imperialist arm of the federal government, but I think that the federal government can be used for the good of the people. We, the people, can use it to help better all of us for our common welfare, as it says in the preamble, that we could use the federal government to make all of us have a better life. And that is what I want to do when I get to Congress, is use the power of the federal government to make a more secure, prosperous society.
Jason, what about you?
Sure. Well, I think there's a couple things, and I give Paula credit on this in regard. I'm sitting here talking about the issues that matter to the voters of Southern Illinois. Paula is as well. Where's the third guy? We're willing to get out there and we're willing to talk about the issues that we're facing. Southern Illinois has been struggling. It's been struggling for a long time. We've got serious problems. This congressional district has an unemployment rate in the double digits. Every county in this district, over the last 5 months, the unemployment rate has gone up every month. But if you look at the resources and the opportunity that exists in Southern Illinois, from the coal, the oil, the gas, our geographic location, SIU, Carbondale, Scott Air Force Base, it's an area tremendously blessed with resources, tremendously blessed with good people, yet we continue to struggle. Why is our median income, our median household income, one of the lowest in the state? Why is our unemployment rate the highest in the state? Why are we shrinking our congressional district population-wise at a higher rate than pretty much every other congressional district in the state? It's because people don't feel that there's opportunity here anymore, and we need to make sure that we go to Washington to fight for the values and fight for the issues, or fight for the issues that are going to bring opportunity back here. I'm a businessman. My family, our businesses, we've created over 1,000 jobs in this region. I understand how public policy can have a positive or a negative benefit for our businesses and our workers and the people that are out there trying to make it. And right now, there's too many people in Southern Illinois that can't find a job. They can't find a job that provides them the opportunity to plant their roots and grow their family. And at the end of the day, that's what we need to do. We need folks that are going to listen to all 12 counties in the district, not just one county, and we're going to represent all 12 counties in Washington.
seems like we have a big disagreement with how government should be. Jason, this question is for you. What is your personal belief in the role of government in people's lives?
Well, I think that's something, I think there's a little bit of a disagreement there, but, I have a great amount of respect for Paula because she says what she means and she means what she says. And I think that though I philosophically disagree with her on the role of government in our lives, I mean what I say and I say what I mean. We're not folks that are going to hide from our beliefs or dodge questions. We're folks that are going to get out there and represent it. At the end of the day, I think the federal government plays too large of a role in our lives. I think we need to roll back the federal government. I want to shrink and I want to shrink the size and scope of the federal government. I talk to farmers, I talk to teachers, I talk to doctors, I talk to small businessmen, I talk to coal miners, and constantly I hear about problems they're facing from different regulatory agencies from Washington that's getting in their way of leading a productive life. This district is shrinking in terms of the number of coal mines. This district is shrinking in the number of medical providers. This district is shrinking in terms of the number of teachers that are active in the area. This district is shrinking in every core function of what government should be. And I see all these opportunities and all these powers going back to Washington, D.C. I don't think the federal government should be playing a larger role in our life. I think the American people are the ones that provide opportunity and prosperity to the region. And I want the American people, the folks of Southern Illinois, to do what they do best. I don't want them to have to deal with the federal government each and every day. I want them to be able to, do what they do best. If it's mining coal, if it's teaching children, if it's taking care of patients, if it's growing a small business. And when we do that, that's how we drive down the unemployment rate.
Paula, what's your personal belief in the role of government?
Well, I'm a nurse, and I realize that the federal government pays my salary as well as the teacher's salary that you actually refer to. I know that FDR came into a devastated country and put 4 million people to work in 2 months in 1933. That's the power of the federal government. If he could put 4 million people to work, and that's why we have the Shawnee National Forest, that's why we have electricity in this rural area. There's no profit in a private corporation bringing electricity to the rural area. That was the federal government. The stopping the devastation of the topsoil caused by poor farming practices. I mean, the federal government can do in a whole lot. And as far as referring to the resources that we have in this county, and I guess you mean coal and gas, remember that having resources does not make a people rich. The richest people in the world would be the people of the Congo, if that was true, because they have more resources in the Congo than any other country in the world, and they're dirt poor and they're being murdered. The richest people in this country would be the people of West Virginia then, if just having resources made you rich. So that does not follow. Having resources does not make for a prosperous society, but using the power of the government for the good of all, and I agree with Jason, health and education are two things that the federal government should be involved in. Also, making sure that all its people are fed and housed. And yet our federal government is so busy killing goat herders in Yemen that it can't bother to make sure that there's no homeless people begging on the streets of our cities, that our kids are being educated, that our ill people are being taken care of. It can't bother with that because it's too busy overseas. I think that's wrong.
Jason, you want to respond just a second? I have a question. Are you for big government then?
I am for a responsive government. I'm for government that helps the people of the country. Any government has to make sure that its people are fed and housed, and our government isn't doing that. I am not for big government when it comes to homeland security, to the military, to to the prison system, which we've gone from 500,000 people in prison in 1980 to over 2 million people in prison today, more than any other country on the world. Land of the free.
Okay.
I just, that's something where we just have a fundamental disagreement. I mean, look, 20 years ago in this congressional district, we had 37 operating coal mines. Today, we don't have 10 operating coal mines. And there's tremendous numbers of people out there that would love to see those coal mines operating because those are quality jobs. The average household income in this district is $41,000. The average Southern Illinois coal miner makes $71,000. So those are great jobs. And when the coal mines are running, that means the trucking companies are active. That means the barge companies are active. That means the people up and down the Kaskaskia and the Mississippi are active. And that's what grows the economy. And it's not just about the jobs directly in the coal mines. It's about bringing down the cost of our utility bills. It's about extracting the natural gas and the oil that exists out there, so we're not paying these ridiculous amounts at the pump. If you look at parts of Pennsylvania and Ohio, if you look at the Dakotas where the unemployment rate is 4.5%, we have the same geological makeup of those areas. It would be really nice in Southern Illinois to have an unemployment rate of 4.5% instead of 10.5%. So with all due respect, I think that those resources and the economic activity that they provide would be a great boon to Southern Illinois.
Paula, you want to respond?
I do want to respond. A lot of those jobs that you're talking about, the coal mining jobs, I agree with you, used to be really good jobs. I come from a family of coal miners myself, and my grandpa and my uncles helped organize the UMW, and that is why coal mining jobs were good, because they were unionized. Now, there are very few unionized coal mining jobs left. You know, when you talk about opening the mines, you're not talking about opening union mines. You're talking about open non-union mines, which the jobs aren't that much better than any other job. As far as natural gas and oil drilling, they bring people in from other parts of the country. They're called roughnecks, so they always used to be called roughnecks. You know, they go from oil field to oil field, from gas field to gas field. They bring in people that know what they're doing. They don't hire some, Southern Illinois person that's never had experience. They bring in people from elsewhere. And you talk about the trucks running. Yes, actually my cousin was run over by a coal truck, 5 years old. This is what happens. You have more traffic accidents. You have more children being run over. You have a decrease in your water quality. You have a decrease in your air quality. You have a decrease in your soil.
Well, I mean, there's just a lot that, and I respect Paula's opinion there, but I just completely disagree. I mean, look, the average coal miner right now in Southern Illinois makes $71,000. It's a fact. It doesn't matter if it's union or non-union. That's a fact. They make $71,000. So that's a great quality of life in Southern Illinois. I'd love to see those people active. You can talk to a lot of people. John O. Jones, state senator from Mount Vernon, he spent his career in the oil industry. We have a very, very, very well-developed oil industry in Southern Illinois. And instead of growing that industry is shrinking. We don't need to bring people in. We have a tremendous opportunity. John O. Jones has fracked over 500 wells since the 1940s when the industry began. So, I mean, to say that we wouldn't benefit from that, it's ridiculous. Of course we would benefit from that. And even if we brought people in from elsewhere, where are they going to buy their groceries? Where are they going to build their houses? Where are they going to spend their money? They're going to spend it here in Southern Illinois. The economy in Southern Illinois is devastated. And I've rolled out a jobs plan and I've rolled out an economic plan that I think would bring opportunity back to the people of Southern Illinois, and I'm standing by that. I think it's a great plan. It's interesting to hear what Paula has to say. I think it's interesting to hear what I have to say. I think Paul and I would both love to hear what the third guy has to say, but we don't know why he never shows up anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. Real quick. I think this is going good. My executive producer is wondering if you guys can put the microphone closer to your mouth. Okay. If you guys can do that, that's just something we want to throw out there. Paula, this question is for you. People are sick of the bitter politics in Washington, D.C. Are you going to be a compromiser, or are you going to stand on your principles if you're elected to the 12th Congressional District?
I don't understand the question, actually.
Okay,
divisive politics is different, I think, than compromise versus principles.
Are you going to stand up for your principles, like Democrats want to have health care, and no matter what, and Republicans don't want to have health care? Are you gonna be divided like that? Or are you gonna try to reach across the aisle and try to get something done, like come into a moderate approach?
Well, I'm not a moderate person, as you probably can tell. What the things I'm saying actually used to be moderate back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, but now they sound flaming radical. I mean, I'm like, oh, FDR put 4 million people to work. That wasn't radical. That's just what happened. Medicare in the 60s was put in within a year. That wasn't radical. That was a step forward. Now I think that we have gone very far to the right, and yes, I would be a very strong voice on the left if I got to Congress.
Okay, Jason, what about you? Are you going to stand upon principle, or are you going to be like Ronald Reagan, reach across the aisle with Tip O'Neill in '83?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a history of folks working together. Right now, Washington, D.C. is very partisan. People are frustrated because they feel that the issues that are really impacting their lives aren't being addressed. They feel that their voice isn't being heard. So when you go to Washington, you have to represent your district, and you've got to make sure you represent the entire district, all 12 counties, all industries, all organizations. What I see in Washington right now is a lot of career politicians. We need to send some folks out there that aren't career politicians that understand how to work together. I give Jerry Costello and John Shimkus a lot of credit. One's a Republican, one's a Democrat, but they've worked together for a long time in Southern Illinois on a lot of different issues that in a very bipartisan fashion, that if we had more people in Washington in their mold trying to do those things, good things would happen. So I'd go to Washington. I wouldn't sacrifice my principles. I've got a strong set of principles, but I would make sure I represented my district, and I feel that I understand my district because I've been up and down this district doing town halls and meet and greets with a lot of people, and I'm carrying their voice to Washington, D.C., not one person's voice.
Okay, Jason, this is questions for you. What are some bipartisan bills you would support? I know this is sort of add on, but what's
Well,
some
I mean, a
bills?
perfect example, and I mean, look, right now in the U.S. Senate, there's over 35 bills sitting there that passed the House of Representatives in a bipartisan manner. Republicans and Democrats both voted for these bills. They passed the House. Now they go to the Senate, and Harry Reid won't bring them to a vote. What do these bills talk about? These bills talk about reforming the tax code. They talk about maximizing domestic energy production. They talk about reforming the regulatory environment that's really harming our industries. So you've got right now, perfect example, over 35 bills that have passed in a bipartisan manner. I would support bills like that, among others, that would really turn around the economy of the 12th Congressional District.
Paul, what about you?
No, I don't think I'd support those bills. Absolutely not. Anything that calls for giving more tax cuts to the 1% who are already sitting on $2 trillion in uninvested money, and we're told with a straight face that if you give them more, they'll all of a sudden start becoming job creators. No. The tax code needs to be go back to where it was in the 60s or the 50s even, when the rich paid more of the taxes, and the corporations paid more of the taxes.
You would go back to I'm sorry to interrupt. You would go back to the 91% under Eisenhower?
Do you realize how prosperous we were back in the 50s under Republican?
Okay. Let her finish.
Let me just jump in on one thing. I mean, before you attack these bills, do you actually know that one of the over 35 bills is actually related to tax reform? Do you know what that talks about?
No, Jason, I'm just going by what you said.
Then I think we need to talk about it. It was passed by Democrats and Republicans, and what it does...
And I'm not a Democrat either, remember that.
Right, but what I'm saying is it's passed in a bipartisan fashion, and what that does is it eliminates deductions and loopholes that large companies and wealthy and connected individuals can take advantage of. And why you wouldn't support a bill like that amazes me, because that's the type of stuff we need. And so those are the types of bills I would support that actually take opportunity away from those folks who are connected, and so that we're not bearing an extra burden that they avoid.
All right, Paul, I'm sorry. You have a minute 30.
Yes, but in the 50s, individual taxpayers paid 51% of the tax burden in the country. Now individual taxpayers like us, working people, pay 81%. So that is a 30% more taxes on individual working people that has been shifted from the very wealthy and the corporations. And I would say, yes, we need to go back to where people who are wealthy, people who are making a lot of money, need to pay more than people who are scraping by day to day on their lousy wages. And by the way, I would also be for raising the minimum wage.
Okay, let's expand. This seems like a big difference of opinion here. You like the Eisenhower and Kennedy rates, correct?
Well, those were different rates, but yeah.
Around there.
Right.
Now, Jason, former the Reagan conservative, he argues you cut taxes, the business people will create jobs. Reagan creates 16.5 million new jobs.
Yeah,
Okay, let me just say this. Then in the 1980s, Reagan did massive tax cuts. What did the rich do with those with their extra wealth? I don't know what you're talking about. They created 6 million jobs.
16.5 they did.
What they did was they started leverage buyouts. They started buying up profitable companies and turning their profits into debt. They started making smaller companies bigger and bigger. Well, like what Mitt Romney did. You know, you target a profitable company and you strip its assets, you strip its pension funds, you lay off its workers, and then you suck in the bonuses and stuff. That's how these people became millionaires. And that's what they did in the 80s. And then in the 2001 tax cut, Bush's tax cut, which gave them even more money, They've closed down 50,000 factories in the United States in the last 10 years. That's what they do with their money. They create jobs, but not in the United States. They create them overseas. They literally pack up their machinery, ship it overseas to a cheaper labor place, and restart it up there.
Jason, you're eager to respond. You have the floor.
Well, I mean, there's just a lot of places to go there. But look, at the end of the day, Democrats like John F. Kennedy, Republicans like Ronald Reagan have showed that when you lower tax rates for all people, when you make our workers and our businesses as competitive as possible, you grow the economy. When you grow the economy, you drive more revenue to Washington, which is something I assume my opposition is in favor of, because they like spending government money. But when you drive more revenue to Washington, that's because when you drive more revenue to Washington, that's because you've grown the economy. What we need to do right now is we need to streamline the tax code so that people understand what the tax code says. Look, the United States Constitution is less than 10 pages. I would say the foundation of our society, the foundation of our government, is less than 10 pages. The tax code now is over 72,000 pages and growing. And it's not growing because it's getting better. It's not growing because it's getting more fair for everybody out there. It's growing because the very well-connected businesses, the very well-connected people can take advantage of those opportunities. What we need is we need a more fair tax code, we need a more simple tax code, and we need a tax code that puts our workers and our businesses in as competitive as a position as possible. And I think that would be something that everybody would be in favor of.
Okay.
Well, if by competitive you mean lowering wages, they've been doing that for 30 years. The average wage in this country, as adjusted for inflation, should be up somewhere around $15 an hour. So yes, we have become more competitive with the low-wage people across the globe, and I guess, that's what the plan is. It seems pretty clear to me. People talk about restoring the middle class. Well, for 30 years, we've been taking the 1% have been taking the middle class and driving them into poverty, and there's been no turnaround. Now, I agree with you that the tax code should not be so complicated, and most of those are tax breaks and tax credits and things like that. I agree with you. You can't run a country on tax credits.
Okay, real quick, this is a follow-up question. It's not on the debate that's scheduled, but do you support, I know he's not alive anymore, but do you support Edward Kennedy's in the 90s and early 2000s, the $15 minimum wage? Do you support that?
I would absolutely support that.
You can answer if you would like.
We need to get more money into the hands of the working class. If you want a prosperous society, you can't do it by forcing down the wages of Americans so they're competitive with the Chinese.
You get more money into the hands and more money into the pockets of more Americans by finding them jobs. And right now, this administration, the Democrats in Washington, D.C., the Democrats in Springfield, for that matter, have created an environment right here in Southern Illinois where people can't find work. We have an unemployment rate in this district of 10.5%. Think about that for a minute. Double-digit unemployment in this district. There's absolutely no reason for it with the resources and the opportunity we have. My goal going out to Washington, D.C. is make sure people have jobs, and not just any jobs, good quality, stable jobs that they can depend on, that's going to be there for a while, that they can build a family on. And that's how you put money into the hands of people. You don't put money into the hands of people by divvying up the population. You do it by growing the economy.
Okay, you vaguely mentioned this. Paul, this is for you. Would you support an audit to the Federal Reserve?
I would absolutely support a yearly audit. Now, we just had an audit of the Federal Reserve 2 years ago, and that's how we found out that the Federal Reserve created $16 trillion out of nothing and handed it to Wall Street. And yet Main Street suffers, as Jason pointed out. We have high unemployment, we have low wages, we have people who are struggling to make ends meet, and yet the Federal Reserve can hand $16 trillion to Wall Street. There's something very, very wrong with this picture. And I also, like Jason, I also support good paying jobs, and that's what the Green New Deal is all about, is doing what Franklin Delano Roosevelt did, put 4 million people to work in 2 months. We also want to put people to work, but we want to put them to work in stable jobs. Fracking gas is not a stable job. It won't last. As soon as the gas is gone, the job is gone. So no, we need stable jobs with renewable energy, sustainable transportation, fully funding our schools, our hospitals, our mental hospitals, our social services, all the things that people need to live a decent life in a decent society. That's what we support at decent, well-paying jobs, as I pointed out. If you have minimum wage at $15 an hour, then you've got a broad base of people who are able to afford to support those small businesses by buying their products. That's how you get prosperity. You get money into the hands of the people and not into the hands of the 1%. Okay,
Jason, Federal Reserve audit?
Yes, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of questions surrounding the Federal Reserve, and absolutely, in the last 48 hours, it's kind of come into the news again, where some people are even viewing it as something that's used as a political tool, which is something we can't afford. So we need to make sure we understand what's happening there. It's a very closed organization, and we need some openness, and an audit would go a long way in helping the American people, the American taxpayers, and elected officials see what's happening there, and whether or not that the actions they've taken have had a net positive impact or a net negative impact on our economy over the last few years?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious.
Well,
We've had an audit. We see what they did, and we can't say that it's been positive in any way. This is not something in the future. This is the past. We can look at the recent past and see, nope, that $16 trillion didn't do a thing for the average American.
Jason, you may respond if you want.
I agree. That's why I support an audit. Us conservative Republicans for a long time have been talking about supporting an audit of the Federal Reserve. So I'm glad that Paul and the Green Party agrees with us in that regard. Once again, though, Bill Enyart, the Democrat's not here. I'd love to know what where he stands on that issue.
Okay. This is just a quick question here. Would you support the firing of Ben Bernanke, Jason?
Well, you can't really fire him. I mean, that's
you
a
can
presidential.
Advocate,
yeah,
yes.
I mean, that's a presidential decision.
You can advocate. I'm sorry, advocate the fire.
And I think that Governor Romney has already essentially said that if he were president, Mr. Bernanke would be looking for work elsewhere, and I think that's probably the right decision.
Paul, what about you?
Actually, I'm for nationalizing the Federal Reserve. I don't see why our monetary supply should be in the hands of private individuals like that. I don't see why 13 banks can make decisions that throw hundreds of thousands of Americans out of work, if not millions of Americans out of work. I absolutely think that the control of our monetary supply should be in the hands of the people and not in the hands of private banks.
Okay. Another Federal Reserve question. It goes to Jason. The currency continues to go down. We all agree you print more money, the dollar value is going to go down. It's caused standard of living to go down. And it's all ultimately caused taxes ultimately to go up. Do you support putting us back, advocating on the gold standard of the Federal Reserve?
That's another thing. In the Republican Party platform, they actually put something in a commission to actually study that decision. I think that's something that absolutely has to be looked at. There's a lot of very sharp people that think that would bring a lot of stability to our economy. I'm a strong believer in a strong dollar, and I think that would probably be something that would have to be looked at and something that I would highly consider supporting. But it'll be interesting to see what President Romney's commission has to say once he's elected.
We had the gold standard up until 1932, or actually we had the gold standard up until 1971.
Richard Nixon took it off. Yes.
Right, and I don't think it brought stability to the United States. We had major depressions every 20 years that threw millions of people out of work while we had the gold standard. William Jennings Bryan said, "Mankind shall not be crucified on a cross of gold," and that's exactly what he was talking about. He was talking about the gold being in the hands of a few people, the same as now the money supply is in the hand of the few people. Having the gold in the hands of the few people. At one time, J.P. Morgan tried to buy up every ounce of gold in the United States, and he threw the country into a major depression. I don't think the gold standard would be helpful in any way. As a green, I'm opposed to the environmental impact that gold mining does with the arsenic and the cyanide that it dumps into our rivers and streams. I'm opposed to killing Mexican peasants to get their land to mine gold on, which is going on right now. I'm opposed to what's going on in South Africa and the Congo, the kind of mining practices that are leading to death and destruction of those people. So no, absolutely not. Gold standard didn't work before, and it wouldn't work again.
Okay, Jason, you looked at me. You want to respond?
Well, I just think we need to be open-minded, and I mean, I don't understand how, considering the last 12 years economically, how we could say that the economy is stable right now. I think we need to be researching everything we possibly can to make sure that we have a stable monetary policy and we have a strong dollar, that the dollar is not being manipulated by anybody. And I think that we need to research those things. A strong dollar is good for America. A strong dollar is good for American jobs, and that's what I support.
Your name was hinted at. You can.
Well, we don't have a strong dollar, and I believe that's what most of these wars and interventions have a lot to do with. I mentioned before that Saddam Hussein was going to sell oil in euros instead of dollars. If that had happened, the dollar would have instantly collapsed, and we would be in a way worse depression. Same with Gaddafi, 30-year dictator who we never minded before. He said he was going to sell oil in dinars instead, gold dinars, by the way, Jason, gold dinars instead of dollars, and the United States instantly started bombing him. And I think that's why they're threatening Iran, because Iran, China, Russia, the BRIC countries are starting to talk about an alternative currency, because the dollar being the world's currency is not working out for anyone but the 1% in the United States.
Okay, you mentioned Gaddafi.
Uh-huh.
Reagan bombed him in '86.
That's true.
But why didn't you say we didn't mind him? Or
Well, I mean, that was all that happened. Reagan threw a couple bombs, killed his child, and then that was it. It wasn't like we bombed him 50,000 times the way we did last year. Last year was obviously a concerted attack to get rid of Gaddafi. That, lobbing a bomb and killing his child, that was just a kind of a spurt. I don't know. Reagan just was like spurting off or something. I don't know.
Okay, you can respond if you want. Jason.
Well, we were talking about the Federal Reserve and the gold standard, and now
I asked her a question.
Now we have an alternative reality of what happened in Libya. I mean,
no,
that
it's
was
not alternative.
That was a NATO action. That was not an American action, and it's very debatable whether or not that should have happened. But I just think when we're talking about it, we need to keep in mind exactly what happened. There was an uprising within Libya, and NATO got involved. Getting back to the economy, getting back to the Federal Reserve in that direction. Paul is for a strong dollar. I'm for a strong dollar. We both agree that right now the U.S. dollar is not strong. And now we need to figure out the correct policies to make sure we have a strong dollar that will benefit the jobs throughout the United States, especially in Southern Illinois.
Okay, we're going to shift a little bit. Paula, what connections do you have in the state or federal government that will help the 12th Congressional District out?
Well, if I was a member of Congress, that would be a very strong connection. I mean, being a member of Congress is a pretty significant position, and I would use it.
What other people you have that can help you out? Like he mentioned, Shimkus and Costello working together. What connections do you have?
I don't have any connections with Greens in Congress, but we don't have any yet. But that's what we're trying to get.
Okay, Jason, you may go.
Well, I think that if Paula went to Congress, she would do everything she thought was best for the people of the 12th Congressional District. I know that when I go to Congress, I'm going to do everything I can, what I think is best, and what I hear from people on the ground about what would be good for the people of the 12th Congressional District. I know it would be very beneficial for Southern Illinois to have a Republican congressman in the majority. We don't know who's going to win the presidency. We don't know who's going to control the Senate, but I don't think anyone's really debating whether or not the Republicans are still going to be in control of the House. And to have a Republican congressman in the majority in the House would go a long way in helping us in terms of a lot of our infrastructure needs, in terms of making sure we bring opportunity and resources back, because at the end of the day, what we need in Southern Illinois is we need a return to the strong industries that have made up this area. That's the ag industry, that's the energy industry, that's the transportation industry. And having a congressman in the majority would go a long way in ensuring that those industries are strong and those industries have the resources they need at the federal level.
Jason, would you ever sign pork or a rider into a bill?
An earmark, essentially?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, earmarks are a great debate right now, and I think the debate is actually, what are the core functions of government, and we have to prioritize our spending. So when you look at an earmark, some people would say that, our farmers and our coal companies need to get their product out in the global marketplace. How do they do that? They do that by taking those coal trucks that Paul was talking about earlier through Chester, Illinois, out to the river. Well, if you go to Chester, Illinois right now, the roads are crumbling, the trucks are dumping over, people in their regular cars are hitting potholes. It's ridiculous. I think it's important that our farmers and that our coal is getting out in the global marketplace. So that's something that makes sense. We need to make sure that our roads and our transportation system is funded and stabilized. That being said, we've got silly politicians in Washington, D.C. that are building museums and naming them after themselves, and building, everybody's heard about the Bridge to Nowhere and the indoor rainforest in Iowa and all these other silly earmarked pork-laden bills that we need to address. So we don't need to waste money, but we need to make sure that the federal government is taking care of its
So
core
when
functions.
necessary, you would.
Well,
Correct.
when it's a core function of government. Is it
okay.
national security? Is it infrastructure? Okay. That type of thing.
Paula,
I would absolutely use earmarks for the good of the people of the 12th district, but not to build more roads and stuff. Like I said, I'm more into sustainable transportation. I would think that rebuilding our railroads would be a much more effective way of transporting goods interior. And I agree with Jason that barge traffic is important. Any earmarks that I would bring to Southern Illinois would be for the good of all the people, not for a few connected people. It would be for long-term jobs and not short-term construction jobs. It would be for the good of Southern Illinois, and that's what I would pledge to do. And I would be totally open about it. It would be all above board.
Paula, this is education now. We're going to shift a little bit to education. Do you support No Child Left Behind, or do you think it should be repealed?
I think it should be repealed. I think that giving federal dollars to testing corporations and this kind of thing is a very bad misuse of education funds. I think that our children deserve to be nurtured in school and have their creativity as well as their learning abilities fostered, and they shouldn't be spending all their time learning how to take tests the way they are now. I would absolutely repeal Race to the Top and No Child Left Behind.
Jason?
No, absolutely. We were talking earlier about some of the issues that we're facing. And one unique thing, and I'm really excited as a conservative, I hear, normally you go out and you talk to farmers, you talk to small businessmen or whatever, you hear about, government overreach, the EPA, taxes, and just the government being in the way of what they're doing. Well, now you hear it from the farmers, you hear it from the small businessmen, you hear it from the doctors, you hear it from the teachers, you hear it from everybody. Government has grown way too big, and No Child Left Behind is a perfect example of that. Our teachers should be the ones in control of making sure our children are educated. We should not be teaching to a test. I really do believe in local government. I'm a states' rights guy. I think that those things need to be addressed at the local level. When you are closer to an issue, you're going to feel the impact of the issue more acutely. You're also probably going to have a better idea of how to fix the issue. So I don't think bureaucrats in Washington need to be telling our teachers how to teach our children or our doctors how to take care of their patients. I think the doctors and the teachers and the small businessmen understand what's happening, and they're the ones that need to take care of their job function.
Jason, what improvements can be done to education? You mentioned repeal and No Child Left Behind, and who's to blame for the educational drop-off?
Well, there's no one person that's to blame for anything. A lot of these problems we're facing, they're not Republican problems, they're not Democrat problems, they're American problems. Or in a lot of cases, when you look at debt and deficits, they're not Republican problems or Democrat problems, they're just math problems. So, I'm not a person that casts blame on people. I'm someone that says, look, when our children graduate high school, when our children graduate community college, when our children come back from the military, graduate four-year universities, a lot of times they're not prepared to enter the workforce. They don't have the skill sets that they need, and we need to make sure that they're prepared to do so. I think we need to hold folks responsible. That's teachers, that's parents, that's coaches, that's everybody, so that our children are really prepared. And we're talking about education, which is a very important issue, but may I remind you that once those folks are done with the education system, one of the great problems we have, one of the true travesties of our nation right now, is when all these children graduate, whatever they're graduating from, all too often they go straight into the unemployment line. And that's what we need to address. We need to make sure that not only are these folks prepared to function in a job, but that when they graduate, there's a job there waiting for them. And that's, as a congressman, something that I want to focus on.
What improvements and who's to blame for education?
Well, here's the thing about teaching children. We know the way to have smart, intelligent, question-asking, curious, inquisitive children. And that begins from the day of birth. Parents need to be involved in raising their kids. Parents nowadays seem to think that just producing a child is enough, and they don't have to have anything to do with raising them. I support 12 months paid maternity leave. For one thing, the United States is one of only 3 countries in the world that doesn't have some sort of paid maternity leave. Now, how can you nurture a newborn baby if you drop it off at a daycare center and go back to work? This is absolutely ridiculous. Babies need to be held. Babies need to be talked to. Babies need to be carried around. Their environment has to be labeled. They have to be read to. There's, by the time the kids get to school, I see it as a nurse. You see one 5-year-old child that doesn't even know their last name, let alone the colors or the numbers. And then you see another 5-year-old child who's bright and curious and inquisitive and knows their name, their date of birth, their colors, their numbers. Some of them can read, and you really are going to blame it on the teachers when they get these 2 kids because one of them learns so quickly and one of them doesn't. No, this is a society's problem, and society needs to address it by encouraging the nurturing of our children from the day of birth and on through school.
You respond or...
No, like I said, everyone needs to be responsible and everyone needs to be involved. It's teachers, it's parents, it's families, it's coaches, it's everybody. And, she's exactly right.
Well, we've had a great start. We'll be back right after this.
Mom could live with us.
But she is so independent, she won't do it.
Fifth Season is your Southern Illinois assisted living professionals. They're locally owned and operated, offering your loved ones independence in a vibrant atmosphere. Fifth Season is staffed 24 hours a day, offering home-cooked meals, medical reminders, and comfortable apartments with private bathrooms and kitchenettes.
This is the happiest I've seen her in years.
Stop by or call their Marion location at 993-2800 or in Benton 877-439-6600 or visit fifthseasonassistedliving.com. Webb's Heating and Cooling asks, are you comfortable now?
Honey, why are all these people in our living room?
Well, I figured all the body heat would keep us warm.
Hey, you got any appetizers?
Babe, get them out of here and I'll call Webb's.
The term routine maintenance is sort of comical to me because routine implies it's done with some regularity. But most people don't properly maintain their home's comfort systems. Webb's Heating and Cooling offers the Comfort Club Maintenance Program to maintain peak performance and safety for your family. Call Webb's Heating and Cooling at 618-942-7628 or visit Webb's on the web at webbsheating.com.
Dr. Bradley utilizes many of the most modern forms of physical therapy and chiropractic techniques, including the revolutionary Pro Adjuster, a light touch, computer-aided device to restore proper function and to return proper motion back to an injured spine, reducing the aches and pains associated with back and neck problems. Call 997-5959 or visit 2306 West Main, across from the VA hospital grounds in Marion.